Welcome back to the Daily Show. I'm here with Dr. Marianne Wolf from North Carolina, who's with the Friday Institute. I'll have her talk about that organization, but she just gave the keynote presentation here at the third National Micro-Credential Summit hosted by KVAC. So, Marianne, tell us a little bit about what your organization does.
Sure. We are the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation at North Carolina State University. So I am a wolf at the wolf pack, which is very convenient. The Friday Institute actually focuses on where research, practice, and policy come together. And so that really allows us both to work deeply in the field in North Carolina and across the country, and quite frankly across the world, but then also always connect that back to research and policy. And so our team focuses on helping develop professional learning opportunities for teachers, coaches, principals, district leaders, and superintendents. And it does involve significant work around micro-credentials as well.
Well, and you've had an interesting career, because I believe in the introduction I heard that you were a fifth grade teacher.
I was a fifth grade teacher.
So tell us what that experience about being a teacher then, and how the micro-credentials would have helped you back then.
Sure. So our work our early work with micro-credentials actually focused on learning differences and thinking about how do you meet the needs of every child, and in particular thinking about things like executive function and attention and memory. And when I became a fifth grade teacher, my first class, I had many students with learning differences. Some were diagnosed and some just were struggling. And what I realized is I would go to a 2-hour workshop, and I even chose some that were really specific, but I never had any follow through. So I would go after school, I'd be all excited about what I learned, and then 2 weeks later I'd pull the folder out of my bag and say, oh my gosh, I didn't do anything I just learned, because you're so busy as a teacher and there wasn't anyone there to urge me along. And what I see with teachers and micro-credentials, and our data is starting to show this, is that the micro-credentials, there's the learning experience, and a lot of times that can be interactive with other people online, but then there's also this opportunity to apply what you learned. So it pushes you to apply and then also to share your reflection, and then you get feedback. And I can only imagine if I had left some of those opportunities of learning and then gone back and done the micro-credential with my students and submitted that, I actually would have changed my practice in a way that I often didn't with just regular a couple-hour workshop. So they're valuable, but I wasn't applying what I learned in the way I think I would with a micro-credential. So I always think I wish we had that when I was a teacher.
Well, since this is relatively new in the education sphere, a lot of people don't quite understand micro-credentials.
Yes.
So if you were in micro-credentials, competency-based professional learning, so how would you break that down into layman's term, what exactly it is?
Sure. We've done a lot of thinking about this, because the term is not easy, right? It's kind of an odd term. And you know, a lot of times I do think about it as something comparable to, like, if you think about a Girl Scout badge. And I'll tell you why I'm saying this. You don't just earn a Girl Scout badge for going and sitting somewhere. You actually earn Girl Scout badges because you go and you do something and you show that you have developed a skill, whether that be camping or cooking or whatever that is. Now, micro-credentials are, I would say, often more in depth, but sometimes very similar, where there is learning, but you actually then have to show that you can do what you've learned. And so with micro-credentials, teachers have different ways of learning, whatever makes the most sense for them, but then they actually will meet with students, collect data, apply what they've learned, and then they actually submit to you those artifacts. So we get student work, teacher lesson plans, we get videos of how they're interacting with students, and then once they've submitted that in their reflections, they actually get feedback from us. And so it's a pretty in-depth process, but again, at the end of the day, if you think about it, the difference is you don't get credit for going and sitting somewhere and just hearing something, or if you're even paying attention. Instead, you really get the credit because you have shown that you can do it, and you've met these standards or criteria that have been set out for you.
So the students have a role in this.
In many of our micro-credentials, the students do, because we ask teachers to work, and we often first ask them to work with one student. So have a conversation with one student, let's learn about that student, what data can you collect, and then after you've done some of these things with one student, then we suggest that they do it with a larger group in the class. But students do, and we've actually found through our research and looking across many micro-credentials. We did a project with Digital Promise where we went back and looked across micro-credentials focused on helping students with attention challenges. And what we found is that not only were teachers reflecting on their learning, the process of the micro-credential was helping their students reflect on their learning, and it was building more student agency or student ownership. So we actually were able to show that in a research project we did recently, that it really does impact students immediately as well.
Related to something that you said earlier, then there is a great deal of accountability and transparency in this process, because that's one thing people say, well, hey, if you're not in a classroom setting or not in a professional learning development setting, then are you really learning? But there is an accountability to this.
I actually think there's a lot more accountability because you have to, on your own, show that you are able to do what we set out to do. And so it is really hard to fake it, you know? I think there's a lot, and you're also submitting what you used. So, you know, the reflection is a really important part, and there's rubrics that really help us with that. But you also are actually submitting what you use. So sometimes we'll get something they did with a student, like how a student thought about their own learning, or logs that they kept, or data, so different assessments that a teacher might have used in order to make decisions for those students. So there's a tremendous amount of accountability, I think, in that. And I also think there's a bit of satisfaction from the learning too. When you earn it, I think teachers are proud because they worked hard and they showed what they know or showed what they were able to do.
And you've raised a very important point there about teacher morale. As we know, because of the downturn in the economy, there's been a lot of states that the funding levels are not where we would like them. Teacher pay is not where we would like it to be. So anything that you can do for teachers to feel valued and to be able to display their value seems like that's a very worthwhile enterprise.
I agree, and I do think there's a tremendous opportunity to show them that we value their professionalism, because I do think one of our important things here is that it can be self-directed, but also sometimes we hope there might be a range of things that the principal or the school district wants a teacher to be thinking about or learning, but it honors that teachers aren't all at the same place. And if you're experienced in this, you can show that, or maybe you go on and work on something else. And so I also think the flexibility, a lot of times I think we don't give teachers the same flexibility we give other professions. Like, I work at home when I have some deep writing to do, because I just write better at home, right? But a lot of times I think with teachers, we ask them to go sit in a room for professional learning when they might actually learn better sometimes, like I do, in a more relaxed setting, or really early in the morning, or even some, you know, at different opportunities. And so there's still that classroom or student interaction component. But I do think it honors, and it also shows that sometimes people take more time and sometimes they take less time. And I do think micro-credentials really value that, exactly what we're trying to model for teachers as they're working with their students in that way.
Okay. Well, let's end with a twofold question.
Uh-oh.
If there's a young person that's thinking about going into the teaching profession, why should they? And then how will micro-credentials be a part of them becoming a better teacher?
I think the job of a teacher is every bit as important, if not more, is more important than it's always been. I think when you look at the diverse needs of our learners and the things going on in our world, I think we need excellent teachers to go in and not just focus on the academic and the cognitive, but also the social emotional learning of students. And there's such an opportunity to help grow and support individuals, but also to learn from them, right? Our students are amazing. And so I think the job is as important as it's ever been. I think one of the things I hold out high hope for around micro-credentials is that you don't just become a teacher and then 30 years later you're doing the same thing. Your job grows and changes every day, even if it might look the same externally. But we're also pushing teachers really hard to really understand every learner and personalize that learning. So I don't want teachers to think they're alone once they get there in that. And I think micro-credentials can create pathways that both show them ways they might want to think about their students' learning, but also ensures that we can support them and provide feedback as they grow.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Mary Ann Wolf, for
Thank
coming
you.
all the way from North Carolina
Yes.
to Kentucky.
Thank you so much.